Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the upset alerts around the country. Probably could have gone for a lot longer, if I'm being totally honest. Definitely a number of games to watch, and it's going to get a little bit crazy. I can almost promise you that. But let's get into some players and coaches that are under a big time spotlight, under big time pressure this upcoming weekend. And I want to start with that big time game happening down there in College Station because there's plenty of pressure to go around. I can promise you that. But I think Brady Cook might just hold the most of it. I think when you talk about this Missouri team to start the season, they've not been nearly enough offensively. They have not been where they could be, where they should be, frankly, with Luther Burden, with Mookie Cooper, with Theo Weiss, with a lot of really good running backs on that roster. They have to be able to do more. And his average yards per attempt, 8.8 on the season. They have to be able to push the ball down the field more often, and that's something that they should be able to do with all the wide receivers they have on the outside. He's been a little bit inconsistent. He's missed a couple of receivers that if he hits them, they probably have touchdowns, and that game gets a little bit more safe for Missouri. So he's just got to play really good football. This is going to be the best defense that he's faced all year. He's going to have to make sure that he's ready to roll, and if he can, then he could end up sending them to the CFP with this win, but if he ends up missing the mark like he has in the first couple of weeks, A&M's going to eat him for dinner. And then you got the guy on the other side that's calling plays against him. Mike Elko has a ton of pressure on him because this is a big-time moment. He had the shot earlier in the season against Notre Dame, and they missed it. There's no two ways about that, and they don't want to miss it again. I can promise you that. So it's going to be one of those things that they get this win. They're 5-1. They're a team that absolutely could make a CFP run because you look at the rest of that schedule, there are hard games, no two ways about that. They do play Texas. I believe they play Alabama, but they're a team that can pretty much compete with anyone on the football field, especially when they're in Kyle Field. So they're going to have to make sure they're ready to roll. I think Missouri, although they haven't been all that dangerous to start the season, they are going to be a dangerous team. They are a dangerous offense that you're going to have to keep track of a number of different guys, and if they can put it together, they're going to be nearly impossible to deal with. But this is going to be a huge amount of pressure. And then the other part of this is I don't think they made a quarterback decision over there. I think I tend to lean Marcel Reed because I don't love this offensive line, at least where it is right now. But I think Connor Wegman definitely has a little bit of claim to this. So we'll see what happens with that one. I obviously would go Marcel Reed, but maybe there's a little bit different of sentiment in A&M right now. Rhett Lashley is another guy I want to talk about, and SMU has a huge chance this weekend. The start of the year was not good. They did not play great football by any means. They lost that game to BYU, which is obviously looking a little bit better right about now, but it's one of those things that they have a chance to turn a corner and really solidify that this upcoming weekend against Louisville. They can get back into the conversation of the ACC. They can do so many different things, and it all rides on this one game. They are not going to be able to move forward in the ACC if they lose this one because there's a number of games coming forward that they're just going to have to be a little bit better than they are going to have to be this upcoming weekend. And if they can't execute this weekend, it might just be a really long season, or at least to end it for SMU. And I think there's a number of things that go into this. They're going to have to make sure they're really disciplined. They had a lot of penalties, self-inflicted wounds early on in the season. That can't happen against Louisville, or you're going to have a nightmare to deal with. And then on top of all of that, the Louisville defense is a ton to deal with. They have so many different guys on every level of that defense. You're going to have pretty much the best game plan you've had all year and have the best execution you've had all year if you're going to be able to win this one, and all of that falls on Rhett Lashley. So going to be really interesting to watch that unfold, and Rhett Lashley is going to have quite the spotlight on him this upcoming weekend. I think this one goes without saying, and frankly, he's under a spotlight for quite some time. He's going to be on their spotlight at least for the next 4 weeks because he's got some big games coming up. This is when he becomes the Ohio State starter. The first couple of games, obviously, were just getting him going. They were getting him into a rhythm, getting him into this offense. You go into Iowa, you can't afford the mistake that he made against Michigan State last week. You can't afford to throw a pick because they could very easily take it back for 6 and totally change this game. But Will Howard's next 4 games, I mean, you have Iowa. I believe they have Nebraska in that stretch. They have Oregon, obviously, in that stretch. It's going to be really tough. They're going to have to find a way to put it together offensively, and I think they have to a certain extent, but probably have left a good bit on the shelf, and we'll see a lot more from Will Howard this upcoming weekend. Can he execute to the level that you very much need to, and can he not make those couple of mistakes that could give Iowa a little bit of life? So this is really just about him executing the offense. Don't force anything. Don't just take what they give you, move the chains. That's his job on Saturday, and frankly, that's probably his job the rest of the season. He does not have to be spectacular. He does not have to take over games by any means. He just has to keep them in front of the chains, keep them moving forward, and get the ball to all of the incredible playmakers that they have. this is when Ohio State starts making decisions. This is when those fans start, really saying what they really feel about Will Howard. And if he doesn't execute on Saturday, maybe they have some more questions that they didn't have earlier. Lane Kiffin, obviously, has a huge amount of pressure on him this upcoming weekend. They have to respond. If they cannot respond, then this is going to be a nightmare season for Ole Miss in a hurry. They're going to Williams-Brice Stadium. It's going to be loud. It's going to be off the walls. They just have to be disciplined. And frankly, last week, they weren't very. They had a number of mistakes throughout that game. They had some penalties that gave Kentucky life that they didn't need to have. A number of things that they had their control over, and they pretty much fumbled. They have to make sure that they keep their feet under them in this game. They have to make sure that that offensive game plan is a lot better than it was a week ago against this really good defensive attack for South Carolina. And more than anything, Lane Kiffin has a lot on his plate. There's a number of different rumors around him possibly taking the Florida job after this year, and obviously he's probably not too worried about that. Doesn't mean people won't say he's worried about that if they lose this game. It doesn't mean that people won't say that he's mentally checked out onto the Florida job and that's the end-all be-all for this team. So you got to avoid that. You got to avoid the craziness in the media after this game, and it's going to be a lot on Lane Kiffin's shoulders to do that. And then you got Kirk Campbell. This is a huge game for him. They are a road dog because of this offense. They're a road dog because they haven't been able to get anything going passing the ball, and they're going to have to do it in this game. There's no two ways about that. I think Michigan is a very dangerous team. I think they absolutely can be really good on offense. The thing is, they have one pace. It is, we're going to run at you, and we're going to run at you, and we're just going to make you quit at some point in this game. Washington's going to be a little bit harder to make quit than people think. They definitely have some really, really good linebackers, have some solid defensive linemen. They might just be able to hold up to this fight a little bit better than USC did. And I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but this is a really good, solid Washington defense, and they absolutely can at least counterpunch you, at least a little bit, and then we'll see what happens. They have to find something of a pass game. I know this is not something that's going to be a huge part of their offense. They have to find something to keep this defense at bay because, as I said, those linebackers will tee off on you. If you're not careful, they will just come down to the box and then tear you to pieces. So you're going to have to make sure you're ready to roll, whether it's elongated run game with the pass game, whatever it looks like. Just make sure that you get the ball out of his hands. Make sure that you get Alex Orji a little bit of confidence, and then maybe you can get this defense on its heels. So it's going to be really, really interesting to watch the game plan here. I think when you look at Washington, maybe it's not a game that you really worry about too much if you're a Michigan fan, but I'd be worried. It's one of those games that you're not really free from really any game going forward with the way your offense is playing. So Kirk Campbell's going to be under spotlight for a lot of this season going forward. Dylan Raiola has another big spot this upcoming week. He has his second test, if you will, and frankly, I believe he passed the first test against Illinois, missed that big-time pass, no two ways about that, but at the end of the day, I think he played really well, and he did pretty much everything you can ask of a freshman quarterback at that moment, so there's going to be a number of different moments where he's going to be forced to execute at the level or maybe even above the level than he did against Illinois, and it's going to be really interesting to watch this one unfold. The biggest thing here is Rutgers is not going to give you a lot of possessions. That's what they do. They're going to run the ball. They're going to try to slow down this clock, and they're going to gut out a win. That's the way they've gone about business the first couple of weeks. That's the way they'll go about business on Saturday. That means Dylan Raiola is not going to have the ball in his hands a lot. That means he's probably going to have the ball in his hands maybe 10, 12, maybe 14 times in this game. 14 might be a little bit aggressive, but he's going to have to make sure he makes the most of all of them. He's going to have to make sure that every single time he is on the field, he is getting points, because if he doesn't get points on a couple of those drives, maybe that's enough for Rutgers to take a lead, and maybe that's enough to put away Nebraska. So this is a huge moment for them. There's no two ways about that. That Ohio State game is probably going to be a little bit too much for Dylan Raiola. Let's just be totally honest. You're in front of your home crowd. You have a little bit of advantage. Take that moment and roll with it. There's a very talented player, one of those guys that can totally take over a game and totally be an absolute legend in Nebraska history once he walks out that door, but this is probably where it starts a little bit. Get that big-time win over Rutgers and then keep it moving throughout the rest of the season. Keep your CFP hopes alive at least a little bit throughout the rest of the year. This is an interesting one because I think we all understand this is not going to be a very close game. Clemson's likely to win. They're likely to win by a lot. I think they're favored by over 20 points in this one. So it's not necessarily that I think Cade Klubnik has a lot on his shoulders to deal with. the defense is pretty good for Florida State, to be fair. I do think that's something that he's going to have to make sure he's ready for. The pass rush is going to try to get after him. They're going to have a lot of guys on that back end that can make those big-time plays that maybe some other teams that Clemson's played just can't necessarily right now. So it is going to be a bigger challenge for him, at least from the defense that he's facing. The other part of this is the game that Clemson kind of stamps their flag. I understand that Florida State's not the greatest team in the world. Doesn't change that Clemson was circling this one to begin the season, and they're still looking at this one as a big-time game, and they feel pretty good about it, don't get me wrong, but he has a chance to totally become a superstar in this game. He has a chance to, frankly, probably get into a little bit of the Heisman conversation. He has played really, really good football, and if he can put together another great performance on Saturday, especially in Doak Walker, although not necessarily that big of a game. I totally understand that. I just think it's one of those moments that when we look back on the season for Cade Klubnik, maybe going into Tallahassee, even though it's not that great of a team on the other sideline, maybe just going into that stadium and getting a big-time win is exactly the confidence boost this kid needs to take them to the playoff and maybe take them a little bit further. So it's going to be incredible to watch all of these players and all of these coaches because maybe these games aren't quite as marquee as the Alabama-Georgia game from a week ago. These are games that are going to define these teams in so many different ways. Missouri has to win this upcoming weekend, or their CFP hopes are in very, very weird place. A&M on the other side, if they want really any shot at the CFP, they very much need to win this game. So a lot to go around over there in College Station and really around the country in terms of pressure as we get a little bit deeper into conference play. So going to be really interesting to watch that unfold and cannot wait to see how they respond to all that pressure. But let's take our last break here, and when we come back, we're just going to get into some questions as we head into Week 6. I think one of the biggest ones for me is, has Florida State fallen too far to get back, at least in the near future? So there's going to be a number of different things that we'll break down right after this, so stick with us.